Okay, Instagram, here we go again. They're not my followers. They're part of my community. They're not my followers. They are a part of my community. Okay. Let us do this. This should be a quick one. That's the plan. To make it as quick as possible. It's Monday. It's my day off. And I have plans to rest. So let's get straight to it. I've had a lot of questions over the last 48 to 72 hours about my thoughts. Good to see you, Toby. About my thoughts about what is going on with the American elections. As many of you will know by now, I was privileged to gain some prophetic insight over the last few years, which I shared. And so far, it's panned out exactly as I believe God told me it would. I've got a lot of questions asking me what I think about certain things going on. So I want to put some things on the record. The summary of what I believe God said to me was, he said, concerning many of the prophets presenting Trump as quote and unquote God's will or no will, I didn't send them. That two, I believe Joe Biden, I saw in a dream from as early as January or December last year, which I shared with a few people in January, that Joe Biden was going to win. I was in a dream. I saw Joe Biden, Kamala Harris. This was before they were the ticket. Barack Obama and Hillary Clinton and all the Democratic leaders in a room where they called me for advice, and I was giving them an earful about their political approach and strategy. A few weeks of the election, I told my wife while we were driving that I saw that Biden was going to win. However, God began to speak to me about certain states, which I mentioned to you, which were going to be critical, but also to watch for issues after the election, which that's still outstanding. Now, this is what I did not see. So I want to be very clear. The things that I have made statements from a place of knowledge and insight as opposed to revelation. And I want to divide between what God said to me and what I am predicting or analyzing on my God-given common sense. Now, my wife had a dream I shared with you guys last week. She had a dream, which she shared with me, which I bore witness with, that though Biden would win in the election system, that there would be a series of challenges by Trump. And in her dream, it looked like Trump was successful in challenging the election, and it became a constitutional issue. As soon as she shared that with me, because I'd been seeing and receiving downloads about this kind of scenario, I told her, let's begin to pray. And that's why I've told several of you, pray for the states, because if that were to happen, it's not so much who would win the election that's the issue. Good to see you. It's not so much that, good to see you, Pastor Emmanuel. It's not so much that Trump winning is the problem. It's the destruction it would do to the American system. There would be all-out war. There would be violence. There would be clashes, and there still might be. I am still praying against outbreaks of violence and bloodshed in the election right now, because I don't think that threat is over. Based on what I've seen and heard, I still am worried, especially in those states I mentioned, Minnesota, Arizona, and Michigan, and other parts of the country. I am still worried that there could be a fallout of the election from people who are Trump supporters and clashes with the left. That's why I think it's irresponsible that the church is parroting unsubstantiated conspiracy theories. I'm going to come to that in a second. And so the question some of you have been asking me is, do I believe Trump will be successful in overturning the election in the court system? And I'll explain how he can do that. The truth is, I don't know. God did not show me the end of that. He showed me that it would happen in terms of the process would be initiated. Whether or not he'll be successful, I cannot tell you as a prophet. I can tell you what my opinion is, but we see in part, we prophesy in part, and I'm not going to go any further. I will never say, thus saith the Lord, about something that I didn't hear him say. My prophetic integrity is too much, it's too valuable to me. Now, let's come to my own insights and understanding. So I've shared with you what God said to me. It's happened so far. Now, let me tell you what I think. First of all, this conspiracy theory that Trump put a watermark on the ballots and therefore they know the fake ones is a lie. It's been debunked by the government. You can fact check it on Reuters. The states in America are the ones who run elections. The federal government, the DHS, has no right to watermark a ballot. Good to see you, Tochi, and everybody else. Good to see you, Esther. And so that's a lie. And it's painful that that lie has been parroted by Christian prophets on cable TV. And this is part of the anger that I feel as a Christian and as a spiritual leader. We are losing credibility because the world is watching us buck dance. We are losing credibility. That is not true. Secondly, the fact that miraculous ballots were found and there's widespread cheating and the Democrat, that's not true as well. Trump sabotaged the postal system. And this is not fake news media. I watched Trump's own words. I read his own tweets. I saw what was going on for myself. I listened to both Fox and CNN, Breitbart and MSNBC, ABC and OAN. I'm clued up along the entire spectrum. I'm not a sheep. I'm not dumb. I can tell when people have an agenda. And I do agree the left-wing media has an agenda. But they have an agenda. They're stylishly trying to paint white black by subterfuge. The right-wing media just flat out lies. Fox News and OAN just flat out lie. They don't have an agenda per se as much as they just tell lies. And so there's blame on both sides. But if you're plugged in enough and you're patient enough, you can weed through the subterfuge to get to the truth. This was always Trump's plan. Electoral officials in the states that decided the election, the swing states, were mostly run by Republican state legislatures. The state governments tried to get the right to count the votes sent in by mail before the election in Michigan, Wisconsin, and Pennsylvania. They were told no. And so in an election where far majority of the people voted by mail, they were told they couldn't count the votes until the election day for this exact precise purpose, because Trump knew what he was doing, working with Republicans. Secondly, Trump told all his fans, all his supporters, you can go watch this, read his Twitter feed. This is not fake news. It's there in his own words, his own face, and his own Twitter feed. He said, don't vote by mail, come out on the day. The Democrats, led by Nancy Pelosi, Chuck Schumer, and Joe Biden, told all their supporters, please vote by mail, because they didn't want to risk people getting intimidated at the polls on election day. Glenn says, left-wing media lie by flagging code. You're right. Well, you're right, Glenn. You're right about that. But that's what I'm saying by it happens on both sides. So yes, they take quotes out of context. I agree. They use music to emphasize certain things. I agree. So yes, see, this is the truth, guys. If you want an unbiased media, start your own. Every media entity has a bias or an agenda. Just take it, right? Every song has a bias or agenda. Every book you read has a bias or agenda. Every TV show you watch, every movie. So if you want an agenda-less media, then wait till you get to heaven, because that's just the truth. Whoever pays the piper calls the tune. And it's something we Christians have to accept, that people who own certain outlets are going to try and push a narrative that suits their perspective, which is why Christians need their own movie houses. Believers need our own news stations. We need our own music industry. We need our own drama and theater industry. Because when you create something, every creator leaves a piece of himself in what he creates. It's just a fact. So I agree with you, Glenn. All I'm saying is the right lies, in my opinion, more bold-facedly. The right doctors pictures online. The right puts out conspiracy theories that are not true. And so as a Christian, don't fall for the trick of one thing is fake and the other is not. Do your research, go through everything, verify it independently. And when you are not sure, keep quiet. So there's some things I'm not sure about, I don't talk about. But coming back to this, so now, Trump cannot win the election in the Supreme Court. That's just the truth. This is how he can win the election. So him talking about the Supreme Court is in itself an agenda. This is what he can do. He can get the legislators in the state he's disputing to throw out the results of the election. In essence, because most of these states have Republican legislatures. He can put pressure on them. So all the stuff he's talking about, all the court cases are not designed to win the election in the courts. They're designed to drum up public sympathy for him, to stir up his base, rile up his supporters, get the narrative of him being cheated out there, so that there is pressure on the Republican legislators in certain key states. This is what then happens. The governor can decide to send his own slate of electors, because America works by electoral college. People don't understand this. It's not whoever has the most vote wins. Every state is given a certain number of electors based on the votes that are won in that state. For instance, California has 55, Texas has 38, New York has 29, Florida has, I believe, is it 20 or 20? Florida has 28, Pennsylvania has 20. And so when the elections are done, these states will send these number of electors to Congress. So California will send 50, Pennsylvania will send 20, and so forth. They are supposed to vote exactly the way their state voted. In essence, if Biden wins California, each of the 55 California electors should go and cast a vote for Biden at Congress. If Texas won 38, each of the 38 should do the same for Trump. What Trump is trying to do is this. Glenn, you're right. You're right. You're right about that. The ignorance of both candidates' policies and context. You're right. So what Trump is trying to do is this. If he can put enough pressure, because the states he needs to win, Michigan, Wisconsin, and Pennsylvania, all have Republican legislatures. The state senates are all, and House of Reps are all Republican. The governor in some of them are Democrats, some are Republican. And so if he can put pressure on those Republican legislators, they can throw out the results of the election saying it was fraud and just choose the electors they want to send. In essence, each state could then send two sets of electors, one chosen by the governor, one chosen by the Senate, or just send one set of electors if both the governor and the Senate in the state are the same, that would then go and vote for Trump. If Congress gets two sets of electors, or electors that they think don't represent the election results in the states, Congress can ignore the electors. In essence, they'll either say, we're not accepting any electors from Pennsylvania, we're not accepting any electors from Wisconsin, from Michigan, and from Georgia. What this will then do is it will invalidate, because if no candidate can get to 270 based on the electors, not based on the votes, then the election is then decided by the House of Reps. In essence, the vote is thrown out completely. The House of Representatives decide who is the next president. Now, you may say, well, that means Biden is going to win. No. That would mean Trump would win, and this is why. Even though the Democrats have more members of the House of Reps than the Republicans, it's not decided on a straight vote. It is decided on a state delegation. In essence, how many states have more Republicans than Democrats in the House of Reps, and how many states have more Democrats than Republicans in the House of Reps? Does that make sense? So it will then mean everybody voted for nothing. Congress determines the election, and the vote would be calculated in the House of Reps based on which states have more Democrats than Republicans in the House of Reps. So even though there are overall more Democrats than Republicans, it will be counted based on state delegations. Now, I haven't done the calculation based on the election results because they're not yet in. But before the election, good to see you, Minister V. Before the election, there were more states with Republican delegations in the House of Reps than the Democrats. I think it was 24-20. So there were 24 states that had more Republican House of Rep members. There were 20 states that had more Democrat House of members. And then there were 6 that were split down the middle. If that holds after the election, and it looks like the Republicans have picked up more seats, if that holds after the election, then the House of Reps could vote. And if everybody voted based on their party, Donald Trump could then be inaugurated as the president of the United States. It would not be by the Supreme Court. All the Supreme Court could do is call into question the result of the election, but they cannot determine the election for Trump. Tochi, you're right. The U.S. electoral system is crazy. It is from 200 years ago more. It's not designed for today, but it is the way it is. And it's not going to change, because if it changed, the Republicans will never win another presidential election for the next 20 years. So they're not going to allow it change. So it is what it is. Let's just deal with it the way it is. And so this is the scenario that many evangelical Christians in the States are hoping for. This was the scenario Trump always knew was his only chance to win. This is why, in my opinion, this is what I've told you what God said to me. This is my opinion. This is why, in my opinion, Trump sabotaged the postal system, cast doubt on the mail-in vote in advance, and is casting doubt on the American electoral system, because he's trying to get the election to the House of Representatives to decide. And it is possible. And like I said to you, my wife had a dream a week ago where she saw that happen. And when she told it to me, I screamed, because I said, baby, this has always been my concern. And so I'm explaining to you guys how that could work. The moment she told me about that dream, I started to pray. And this is why I started to pray against it. Okay, I'd be lying if I said I don't care who won, because I do think I am slightly happier that Biden won this election for one reason only: as a message to the body of Christ to stop our idolatry and our prostitution. But that aside, I'm not concerned with who won the election, because whoever wins the election, America is headed for trouble and judgment. Facts. But if Trump had won by the normal electoral system, I would have been fine. If he wins this way, America is going to burn a lot quicker than it would have normally, because there's going to be anarchy. America would have destroyed the faith in its electoral system. You could argue Trump is already destroying that faith now, and the rest of the world would lose respect for America. Dictators in places like Turkey and Iran and North Korea and Putin in Russia would suddenly be emboldened, and the world would literally overnight, the world would be on fire. Now, let me end with this. To the Christians, for those of you, I preached a message. Well, it wasn't a sermon. It was a table talk yesterday at church. It was called "Come Sit With Me," where I laid out my plea for unity in the body of Christ. Christy, well, yeah, you're right, but it would lose even more respect for them. And let me talk about that. For all the people who have a problem with Trump saying, I don't know how 70 million people could vote for him. Let's be real. 70 million people voted for him for a reason. So if the Democrat Party was that perfect, does that make sense? Let's stop demonizing people when we have to choose between two imperfect options. Because yes, as a Christian, I do feel strongly about abortion. I do feel strongly about the sanctity of marriage. I do feel strongly about many of the things that Trump has done to favor the church. I have to be honest. Whether or not I like his character, those things were on the ballot. On the other hand, other biblical things like love for your neighbor, like caring for the less privileged, like not being bigoted, like treating people with respect, like being honest, we're also on the ballot. Bayo, just give me the day and the time we can do the Zoom. I'm down for that, because I think we need to educate the church about these things. And also, the Democrats have always been horrible at messaging. The moment I heard the term defund the police, I knew they were in trouble. Now, what they meant was take some of the money being spent on the police and use it for things like counseling and community development. But when you use the phrase defund the police, what do you expect? The Republicans also did a great job at painting the Democrats as socialists. Now that makes me laugh because nobody minds a stimulus check. Nobody minds a bailout. All these are socialist things. In the UK, we have the NHS free, government provided. That is socialism, isn't it? By the definition. But the Democrats always do a horrible job at messaging, and they let the Republicans craft the argument. And so, if I was an American citizen who was a Christian and did not want to become a communist country, seeing the riots in the streets, which were many times instigated by far-right groups to blame the left, but that we digress, I don't blame them for voting for him because it was two imperfect choices. My issue was always, don't put God's name on it. Own it. Be honest enough to say, I'm voting because I'm white and I'm afraid all the black and brown people are taking my job. That is real. Rural America feels like urban America has left it behind. That is real. Abortion is real. Same-sex marriage is real. All these things are real. But doing it this way, leaving it or destroying the pillars of democracy to steal it this way. Pastor Emmanuel, you're right. You're right. And I know this for a fact. Those of you saying many pastors on Trump's payroll, that's not a conspiracy theory. I know this for a fact. I have seen it prophetically, and I know people in the system who tell me it's true. This is not conspiracy. There are many pastors on the payroll, and there's many ways you can be on the payroll. It's not just real money. You can be on the payroll by opportunities. You can be on the payroll by being set up with publicity. But there are many pastors eating, in essence, like in the Bible days where there were prophets eating at Jezebel's table. There are prophets and pastors today eating at Trump's table, and that's part of why we've been sold the lies we've been sold. But I'm coming to that as I close. The church will have blood on its hands if we don't stop the conspiracy theories. The lies. For instance, the woman comes out and says her ballot was stolen and she wasn't allowed to vote. Pastor Wire, watch, it's been exposed. That you just keep praying that prayer, but God will expose it. You'll see. Over the next 3-4 years, it'll start to come out. I can put thus saith the Lord on that one. She comes out and she says her ballot was stolen from a mailbox. She didn't have a right to vote. She goes to the Electoral Commission after they hear her name. First of all, Trump's campaign doesn't let her get asked questions. But then she makes the Electoral Commission hears the complaint. They do the research. They find her ballot and her signature is on it. But this doesn't get spoken by the right media. That woman, her signature was on her ballot. She was offered the chance to make a formal statement saying her ballot was stolen, which would have exposed her to fraud charges if proven not true. And she declined to make the formal statement. But these are the people the church is parroting on Christian TV as proof the election was stolen. There will be riots and bloodshed if that doesn't stop, because we are telling people we're doing the exact same thing we accuse the Muslims of doing. We're starting a jihad. You're telling people this is God's war fight. That's what the Muslims do when we attack them for being terrorists. They believe they are fighting for their God, for their prophet. What is the church do, or what the church is doing now is no different. And we will have blood in our hands. I am pleading with every American leader, just keep quiet. If Trump thinks he has a case, let him go to court and prove the case. But let's stop the conspiracy, let's stop the ginning up, and let's stop racial bigotry covered up with religion. Because part of this is just racial bigotry. White Americans are worried that they're shrinking in population, and yes, I said it, they're shrinking in population, and white, black and brown people and immigrants are taking over their country. That's it. That is simply it. That is a valid complaint. Just don't badge it in God. There are some who truly significantly authentically are worried about some of the Democrat policies on abortion and same-sex marriage and things. True. But my question to those genuine brothers and sisters of mine is this. Which side of the Bible are we to support? This is why I choose to support the Democrat side of the Bible. Let me tell you why this is the side I would choose if I had a vote. In the new covenant, God doesn't ask us to legislate morality. Hear me. We should fight for legislation to protect our religious freedoms, yes. But to fight for legislation to control people's behavior that we were not able to control by evangelism and prophetic impartation is just wasted, in my opinion. If we did our jobs, we wouldn't need Roe versus Wade to be overturned, because mothers would not want to be aborted because they'd have the conviction of their beliefs in God. Every time Jesus cries about something being a weightier matter of the law, he's talking about how we treat people. The Bible says that by the mercies of God, hey, Shio, good to see you, man. Long time. How you doing, my brother? We need to catch up, man. Please hit me up in my DMs. Shio, we need to catch up. The Bible says that it is by the mercies of God that he beseeches us to present our bodies a living sacrifice. One of the reasons why the world doesn't want to hear the American church on the issues of morality is the American church, by and large, has proved that it doesn't love the people around it. It is proved by its political affiliations and its actions that it does not care about humanity. And I'm not generalizing. There are many churches who do. I'm just saying the overall picture is what it seems. It has sided with bigotry and oppression and racism and slavery throughout history. When I read my Bible, Jesus seems to be more concerned with how we treat people than what we demand from them. Sinners are going to sin. They're sinners. Unbelievers are going to not. An unbeliever is an unbeliever. I cannot legislate an unbeliever's morality. My job is to bring him into an encounter with Christ. We must control the political arena to protect ourselves from oppressive legislation to our faith. True, but we would not need to do that if we were doing our job. Persecution is coming to America. Book it. And it is God's will to allow it. The same way it was God's will to allow persecution in the early church. So when the persecution starts in the next 5 to 10 years, and these same prophets come back and tell you, this is why we said vote for Trump, that's a lie. This is why God said no. God was behind or permitted the persecution to the early church to purify it and to reconfigure it. The same thing is going to happen in America and the West in this season. God is behind or is permitting a lot of this persecution coming our way to get the church to rearrange itself. And the fighting that these prophets are doing against it is they don't want to have to go through that. They don't want to have to reconfigure. They don't want to have to repent. They don't want to have to redo the way church is done. COVID was the warning. We failed. I truly believe if the church had treated COVID correctly as a sign from God to reorganize how we do church and become more focused on reformation and discipleship as opposed to shows and big budget organizational ministry, then that may not have been necessary. But we failed the COVID test, and now we're failing the election test. If we'd held Trump accountable for 4 years and said, hey, we'll vote for you, but that's wrong. We'll take the judges, but please don't tell people that it is godly to behave this way. If we'd done that, then maybe he could have been Cyrus. Who knows? But like I said yesterday at church, Trump was a child or is a child, and the church was a bad parent. We enabled the child. We promoted the child's horrible tendencies. We spoilt the child. We allowed the child to become petulant. The child grew up, committed a crime, and went to jail. And now we're crying. The election was the legal system handcuffing Trump, the same way a policeman handcuffs a shoplifting teenager. And rather than shout, leave my son alone, we should look inwards and say, how did we raise this quote-unquote child? Folks, I'm going to leave it there for now. Maybe I'll come back tomorrow. It's my day off. I'm about to go for a walk with my mom. She's waiting for me. She's going to be banging on my door in a second. And you know when mama calls, I got to run. My mom's been staying with us for a few months now, and I'm so glad to have her around. So keep the questions coming in. I'll answer them. I'll come on a live maybe once a day for the next few days. I'll answer them. I'll repeat what God said to me prophetically, but I'll separate it from what I understand intellectually. And so prophetically, Biden was going to win because he won 3 states. Minnesota, God said, watch these 3 states. When Minnesota was 1, I'm going to say with Christy, Arizona was 2, Michigan was 3. Also watch those states because there's going to be trouble in their states. Except prayer intervenes. Biden was going to win, Trump was going to lose. God didn't send the prophets that told us Trump was going to win. I said that loud and clear 2 nights before the election. God said I didn't send them. So that's what God said. Also, God showed my wife in a dream and confirmed to me in my spirit, or said to me in my spirit, but I wasn't sure. When I hear something in my spirit, it's different from something I receive as a revelation. But then my wife confirmed it with a dream that Trump was going to contest the election through the legal system to get it. Well, that's what she saw. And in her dream, she said it was overturned. I began to pray against it. And I'm praying against it because when my wife has dreams, we've had several dreams. She's had several dreams through the years. Her dream language is not the fixed language. Her dream language is the God saying this is what's happening language. So several times she's seen horrible things happening that we've been able to avert by dream, but we will see the signs that the thing was about to happen. So when God gave her that dream, not me, what I took from it was he was saying, pray against this. It's not settled. Like I told you guys as well, the night before the election, I kept seeing a pendulum swinging in my spirit. So we've been praying against that because if that happens, America falls apart. If Trump had won fair and square, I would have been fine with that. If that happens, America falls apart. That's what God said to me. The rest I've shared with you today is my understanding of the political landscape. Please do your homework. Don't listen to people telling you stuff that is a conspiracy theory. Fact check. Hear all sides. Ask God for wisdom and don't be a part of conspiracy theories. Let's keep praying for America. His kingdom come. His will be done in earth as it is in heaven. I'm out, guys. Take care. Bye-bye.